Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Listening and Responding. This is where we take time at the very beginning of our week to reflect on Sunday's message and one of the key things and talk about, what's one thing I can practice this week in following the way of Jesus. And just a reminder that we are not following the ways of culture, right? The ideas of culture. We're following Jesus, and it's his very presence in our lives that brings real life to our bodies, into our minds, into our souls. And so we are in the Lord's Prayer series, and I'm loving this series and what we're learning together. And, how are you doing? How are you doing with slowing down with the Lord's Prayer? It's my big encouragement to all of you is to slow down with the Lord's Prayer and just say it, one line and just pause and just listen for what Jesus wants to do. So this week, the line is, your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Then just sit. And if it means just sitting and staring outside at the beauty around us, just sit and be with Jesus. I've also taken the time, of course, I'm asking you to slow down. I'm slowing down. And with this whole section of scripture, and the last 2 weeks, the words of Jesus to Mary of Bethany have just really been playing on my mind. And for lack of a better word, it's kind of haunted me. It's been like following me. It won't let me go. And the words are, Mary has chosen the one thing necessary, and it will not be taken from her. So Mary has chosen what is better, Jesus said, and it won't be taken from her. And we talked about this in the first message where I introduced this series on the Lord's Prayer. And many of you will recall the story of Jesus' friends in Bethany. There was Lazarus, there was Martha, and there was Mary. They were brothers and sisters. And Jesus was visiting them with his disciples while Martha was rushing around, distractedly preparing and serving. And Mary, who sat quietly at Jesus' feet as he spoke, was commended for choosing the one thing necessary being prayer. It's that intimate time with Jesus, and it won't be taken from her. Jesus said it won't be taken from her. And the actual scripture is Luke 10, 41 and 44. It's at the very end of the chapter. And Jesus says to Martha, 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 you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen what is better, and it won't be taken from her. And you know what? We all have Martha tendencies, and we all have Mary tendencies. And the Martha in us says, things have got to get done, right? Like for those of you who are more, maybe slightly that planner, the type A personality, things have got to get done. And there are, people to feed, there are places to go, there are things to accomplish. We got to get them done. For those of you who understand, how often do we get offended when our plans don't work out, when we want things a certain way and they don't go that way? So the challenge is that our identity can end up coming from what we do and what we accomplish. But reality check, God didn't create us as doers or workers first. That was not his intention. So let's look at God's commandments for a moment. Remember what I shared on Sunday. His 10 commandments and his will for us is not meant to restrict us. They're meant to show us how to live as free people. So when God freed his people in Israel from the Egyptian slave drivers, he commanded them to rest. It's one of the commandments for a whole 24 hours, and he called it Sabbath. And we're to begin our week with Sabbath rest and really begin our day from a place of rest in God's goodness, his all-knowing, his all-caring nature. He's the good shepherd. And we've talked about this at the beginning of this year. He's the good shepherd. He goes before us and he knows the way. We don't. He knows what we need before we even ask. He knows what we're going to require. And he's not a slave driver. He's not behind us driving us. He's not a manager. He's not a boss. He's a good father. It's a good father. And the language of God's kingdom is family language. We're not a corporate structure. We don't live by a checklist. We live by relationships. And an identity based on what we do, our accomplishments and our achievements, will only seek to isolate us. And ultimately, that will be taken from us. What we do doesn't last. What I do is replaceable. I am replaceable. And what I achieve is here today and it's gone tomorrow. It's so temporary, so temporary. And honestly, the demand for us to achieve and to do is it's a never ending whole. Like the more is this never ending eager taskmaster that says you've got to do more, you've got to do more. So if you recall, Josh talked about this on the previous Sunday when he was talking about our Father, praying to our Father and who's in heaven, hallowed be his name. He talked about how our assignment or our work is not our calling. Our calling is unto Jesus, it's unto Christ first and foremost. And it's recognizing that I am a son and a daughter in this new family of Jesus because of what Jesus has accomplished. And in this new family of Jesus, which is God's kingdom, it's here and it's now and it's among us. And our ability to experience it because of Jesus is real. It's very real. His kingdom and his will on earth as it is in heaven. And so my identity exists because of my Father, our Father, and it's through his love for me and for you that he calls us a daughter and a son. It has nothing to do with what I do. So God's command to us, his command is Sabbath rest. It's the fourth commandment. And it's not like the world's rest. It's God's rest. It's his purpose. Its purpose in this rest is to stop doing, to rest, to quiet ourselves, our anxious thoughts, to worship him, and to take delight in all that he has done and will do. And Jesus knew this well. And it's Jesus who says one thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. And when I hear this, like what's been really playing in my mind is when I hear this, my heart says, I want that too. I want the one thing that is better and that won't be taken away from me because everything in this life is so temporary. I want that one thing. And, don't you want that as well? The one thing that won't be taken away from us. So what happens in your heart when you hear that? And, really think about this. God doesn't demand work from us. He's actually demanding that we rest. He commands it. And this rest is the stopping, the quieting, the worshiping, and the delighting. And this action helps us to learn how to trust God. Well, work leads us to trust in ourselves and our abilities. To Sabbath rest means we're trusting in God and his abilities. So very important. And the Martha in us gets easily offended by things that are not going in the way that we think they should go or in the way that we think Jesus wants to be served. We do this in our worship services on Sunday all the time. We think that, it needs to be a certain way. Whereas Jesus wants us to be able to host him. What does he want? I've been guilty of that, absolutely. And what if we were really open to Jesus, his will, no matter what? And that we would choose not to be offended when things did not go the way that we think that they should go. So, it's interesting that Jesus, he rebukes Martha for making it about her work and taking offense when Mary had chosen the one thing necessary. What Martha is doing is about her. It's not about Jesus, and it appears good. It's not bad, but it's temporary, and it shows a misunderstanding of who Jesus is and what he values, what's valuable to him. What does he want? Martha wanted her experience with Jesus on her terms, while Mary came to his feet. I want to repeat that. Martha wanted her experience with Jesus on her terms, while Mary came to his feet. So Martha was gently rebuked. Mary was commended. What Mary is doing, it carries eternal value and it won't be taken away from her. So how often are you and how often am I offended when Jesus is among us and when things don't go our way? How often is my mind and my heart offended by Jesus? I think it's more than we fully recognize, especially as we're seeking to get to know him. There are things that we're learning that we're like, oh, I don't know about that. And to then, that's why it's so important to sit with him and get to know him. And to be reminded, as Martha was, not to be anxious and troubled about many things. Jesus gently rebukes that. He's like, no, you don't need to worry about those things. I've got those things. And that, he says to Martha, but few things are needed, and indeed only one. That's the NIV translation. Mary has chosen what is better, and it won't be taken away from her. So as you go into this week, I just want to encourage you just to call out to Jesus. Help me to choose, like Mary, the one thing necessary to sit with you, to be with you, to love on you, and to allow you to teach me. And this week, practice just being with him. Again, whether that starts with just 10 minutes, maybe 15, and just sit and just let it get started and see how your desire grows and how even your priorities in terms of how you orient your time change. But just start small, one step at a time, and let Jesus show you what it looks like to choose the one thing necessary that won't be taken away from you. So bless you as you go into this week.